The warning came on a Tuesday. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center of Earth Station Alpha, watching the massive alien ship float in space like a metal mountain. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The ship had appeared 3 days ago without warning, just sitting there in Earth's orbit, waiting. "They're sending another message," said Commander Torres, his voice tight with worry. Sarah nodded. She had read the first message 100 times. The words were simple but scary. The Galactic Confederation wanted to talk. They said humans were spreading too fast across the stars. They said humans took too many resources and didn't care about other species. The alien ship was from a race called the Vorthek. They looked like giant insects with 6 arms and glowing blue eyes. Their leader, High Judge Kexmeran, had delivered the first message himself. His voice was cold and hard, like metal scraping against stone. "Humans are a problem," the message had said. "You breed like insects. You consume worlds without thought. You build weapons instead of art. The galaxy has rules. You will follow them or face the consequences." Sarah remembered the fear in the room when they played that message. Earth's leaders had argued for hours about what to do. Some wanted to negotiate. Others wanted to fight. A few suggested hiding on distant worlds and hoping the aliens would forget about them. But Sarah knew the truth. The aliens weren't here to negotiate. They were here to deliver an ultimatum. The second message proved her right. "Admiral Chun," Torres said, "the alien ship is moving. They're requesting permission to dock." "Denied," Sarah said quickly. "Tell them we'll meet them here in space." An hour later, Sarah floated in a small shuttle between the 2 massive space stations. The alien ship was even bigger up close. Its surface was covered in strange symbols that seemed to move and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. High Judge Kexmeran appeared on the communication screen. His insect face filled the display, compound eyes reflecting the light like broken glass. When he spoke, his mouth parts clicked and twitched. "Admiral Chun," he said, "I bring the judgment of the Galactic Confederation. Humanity has been found guilty of excessive expansion and resource consumption. You have ignored the natural order of the galaxy." Sarah kept her face calm, but inside she was angry. "What natural order? We've never met any of you before. How can we break rules we didn't know existed?" "Ignorance is not an excuse," Kexmeran replied. "The galaxy belongs to the ancient races. We have maintained peace for 1,000,000 years. Humans threaten that peace. How?" Sarah demanded. "By exploring space, by building colonies, by trying to survive, by breeding without limit, by taking resources that belong to others, by developing weapons of war instead of seeking harmony." Kexmeran's eyes glowed brighter. "In 50 years, humans have spread to 300 star systems. You consume everything and give nothing back." Sarah wanted to argue, but she knew it was pointless. The aliens had already made their decision. "What do you want from us?" "Submission," Kexmeran said simply. "Population controls. No more than 1 billion humans in the galaxy. Technology limits. No faster than light travel without our permission. No military ships larger than a shuttle. Complete surrender of all colony worlds beyond your original 50 systems." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. They wanted to cage humanity, like animals in a zoo. They wanted to stop human progress and keep them weak forever. "And if we refuse?" she asked. KEX single quotes MIRAN made a sound that might have been laughter. "Then you will learn why the galaxy fears the Confederation." The transmission ended. Sarah stared at the blank screen for a long moment, then activated her communicator. "All ships, all stations," she broadcast on the emergency frequency. "This is Admiral Chun. Code red. Prepare for immediate evacuation of all outer colonies. The aliens have given us 1 week to surrender. We're not going to do it." The next week was chaos. Ships raced between star systems, carrying supplies and people. Some colonies refused to leave. Others packed everything they could and ran for the edge of known space. Earth's government split into factions, some demanding surrender, others supporting Sarah's decision to resist. On the final day, Kexmyron returned with a fleet. Sarah had never seen so many ships in one place. They filled the space around Earth like a swarm of metal locusts. Each ship was the size of a city. Their weapons could crack planets in half. "Last chance, Admiral," Kexmyron said. "Submit now, and your deaths will be quick." Sarah looked around. The command center at her officers. They were scared, but they stood ready. She thought about her daughter on Mars, her son commanding a colony ship near the rim. She thought about all the humans who had worked so hard to reach the stars. "No," she said simply. Kexmyron's compound eyes flashed. "Then you have chosen extinction." They. Attack began with light. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out from the alien ships, but they didn't target human vessels. Instead, they struck the jump gates that connected star systems. One by one, the gates exploded in bursts of twisted space. And time. Sarah watched in horror as humanity's network of faster-than-light travel collapsed. Colonies were cut off from each other. Supply lines vanished. Ships caught between systems were trapped in empty space. "They're not trying to kill us," Torres whispered. "They're cutting us off." The second wave of the attack was worse. The aliens used weapons Sarah didn't understand, devices that bent space itself. Star systems began to move. Not the planets or the stars, but the space around them. Human colonies were pushed away from the galaxy's center, forced toward the cold emptiness at the edge of the spiral arms. Billions died in the chaos. Ships crashed into planets as gravity changed without warning. Space stations collapsed when the fabric of reality twisted around them. Entire worlds were flung into the void between galaxies, their populations doomed to freeze in the darkness. Sarah's flagship was caught in one of the space storms. She felt the ship shake as reality bent around them. Through the viewports, she watched Earth grow smaller and smaller as they were pushed away from home. "Admiral," the communications officer called out. "We're receiving emergency signals from across the fleet. Everyone's being pushed toward the rim. The aliens are herding us like cattle." Sarah gripped her command chair as another wave of twisted space washed over them. She could see other human ships in the distance, all of them being pushed in the Alve. Same direction, away from the warm center of the galaxy, away from the rich worlds and busy trade routes, away from everything humanity had built. "Open all channels," she ordered. "All human ships, all colonies that can still hear us." The communication system crackled to life. Thousands of voices filled the bridge, scared people calling for help, asking for orders, begging to know what was happening. Sarah took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun to all human forces. The aliens wanted us gone because they feared what we might become. They've thrown us into the darkness at the edge of the galaxy, thinking we'll die out here like animals." She paused, watching Earth disappear behind them as the space storm carried them away. But they made one mistake. They didn't kill us. They just taught us that the galaxy belongs to the strong. And when we come back, we'll be stronger than they ever imagined. The transmission ended. Around them, the void between spiral arms stretched endlessly in all directions. Humanity had been cast into the darkness, but they were still alive, and they were very, very angry. 70 years had passed since the exiled Dr. Marcus Wolf floated in the cold vacuum of space. But he wasn't wearing a spacesuit. His skin had changed, becoming thick and dark like leather. Tiny holes along his neck opened and closed, filtering oxygen from the thin gases that drifted between the stars. His eyes had grown larger, better suited for the dim light at the galaxy's edge. This was what humans had become. Marcus pushed himself through space using small jets built into his spine. Around him, the human settlement of New Sanctuary looked nothing like the space stations their ancestors had built. The structures were alive, grown rather than constructed. They pulsed with a slow heartbeat and breathed through pores in their hull. "The harvest ships are ready," said Elena Vasquez, swimming up beside him. She had been his student once, back when humans still needed air to breathe. Now she was something else, something new. Her arms had split at the elbows, giving her 4 hands to work with. Gills along her ribs opened and closed as she spoke. Marcus nodded. "How many?" 12 ships. Each one can process a small moon in 3 days. Elena's voice carried an odd harmonic, as if 2 people were speaking at once. "The crews are eager to test the new bio-integration systems." They swam through space toward the harvest ships. The vessels looked more like giant insects than spacecraft. Their hulls were segmented and flexible. Tentacles hung from their undersides, twitching with anticipation. Inside each ship, Marcus knew, were hundreds of humans who had changed even more than he had. The first ship they entered was called the Devourer. Its captain had once been a woman named Lisa Park. Now she was something between human and machine. Her body fused with the ship's nervous system. Cables ran from her spine into the walls. Her consciousness extended throughout the entire vessel. "Marcus," she said, her voice coming from speakers throughout the ship, "the Outer Scouts have found something interesting. A dead world rich in rare metals. No alien presence for 50 light years." "Perfect," Marcus replied. "Let's see what our children can do." The harvest fleet moved toward the dead planet like a pack of hungry predators. Marcus watched from the Devourer's bridge as they approached their target. The world was gray and lifeless, its atmosphere long since blown away by solar winds. But sensors showed vast deposits of metals and minerals beneath the surface. "Beginning Phase 1, Lisa announced. The first ship to reach the planet was the smallest, a scout vessel called the Probe. It landed on the surface and immediately began to change. Its hull split open like a flower, revealing writhing tendrils that burrowed into the ground. Within minutes, the ship had spread across several miles of the planet's surface. "Mineral analysis complete," reported the probe's captain. "Iron, titanium, rare earth elements. Sufficient biomass in the subsurface for full conversion." Marcus smiled. This was the moment he had been working toward for decades. "Begin the harvest," he ordered. What happened next would have horrified the humans of 70 years ago. The probe released billions of microscopic organisms into the planet's crust. These creatures, part machine and part living tissue, began to break down rock and metal at the molecular level. They multiplied rapidly, spreading through the planet like an infection. The other harvest ships landed and added their own swarms of molecular converters. Within hours, the planet's surface began to change. Rock turned to liquid. Metal flowed. Like water, the very structure of the world was being taken apart and rebuilt. Marcus watched through sensors scattered across the planet as the conversion accelerated. Deep beneath the surface, ancient bacteria that had somehow survived the planets death were absorbed and analyzed. Their genetic codes were copied and integrated into the human collective knowledge base. "We're learning," Elena said beside him. "Every world we harvest makes us smarter, stronger." By the end of the first day, half the planet was gone. Not destroyed, but transformed. The raw materials had been converted into new ships, new humans, new technologies. The molecular converters had built factories that built more factories. Exponential growth in action. Marcus descended to the planet's surface, or what was left of it. The ground beneath his feet was soft and warm, like living flesh. Structures rose around him that defied easy description. They looked like buildings, but they breathed and moved. They were ships, but they were also alive. "Magnificent," he whispered. A young human approached him. She had been born in space after the exile, and her body showed it. Her limbs were longer and thinner than the original human template. Her fingers ended in sharp points that could cut through metal. Most striking were her eyes, which had no pupils, but instead showed swirling patterns of light. "Dr. Wolf," she sighed. "The deep core samples are ready for analysis." Marcus followed her to what looked like a beating heart the size of a building. This was the central processing unit of the harvest operation. Inside, the planet's core materials were being broken down and analyzed. Every atom was cataloged, every mineral deposit mapped and converted. But the real prize was knowledge. "We found something interesting in the deep rocks," the young woman said. "Fossilized remains of an ancient civilization. The converters have extracted their genetic memory." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This was what made humans different from other species. They didn't just take resources. They took everything. Every scrap of knowledge, every fragment of technology, every trace of biological innovation. "Show me," he said. The data flowed directly into his enhanced nervous system. Images and information from a race that had died millions of years ago filled his mind. He saw their cities, their art, their science. He learned how they had manipulated gravity and bent space to their will. "Add it to the collective," he ordered. Within minutes, every human in the harvest fleet had access to the ancient knowledge. They began incorporating the new technologies immediately. Ships started to reshape themselves, adopting gravity manipulation systems based on the extinct aliens' designs. This was how humans had survived in the void, not by staying the same, but by becoming something new. Every world they harvested made them stronger. Every dead civilization they encountered added to their capabilities. By the third day, the planet was completely gone. In its place floated a cloud of new ships and structures. The human fleet had doubled in size. Each vessel was more advanced than the ships they had arrived with, incorporating technologies from the ancient civilization they had absorbed. Marcus stood on the bridge of a newly grown ship, watching the final cleanup operations. Tiny scavenger organisms swept through the space where the planet had been, collecting every last particle of matter. Where to next? Elena asked. Marcus consulted the star charts that now existed as patterns of light in his enhanced brain. The nearest inhabited system was 200 light years away, too far for their current technology. But the scouts had detected something else. "There," he said, pointing to a distant star. "Long-range sensors show artificial structures. Probably an automated mining station." Elena smiled, and Marcus noticed that her teeth had become sharp and metallic. "Aliens? Maybe. Or maybe just their machines. Either way, we'll learn something new." The harvest fleet began moving toward their next target. Behind them, the space where a planet had once orbited was empty, except for a few drifting asteroids. They had left nothing behind. No ruins, no debris, no sign that a world had ever existed there. This was the new human way. They took everything and gave nothing back. They learned from every encounter and grew stronger with every victory. The aliens who had exiled them thought humans were dangerous when they spread across 300 star systems. They had no idea what was coming. Marcus closed his eyes and felt the collective consciousness of his people. Millions of minds linked together, sharing knowledge and purpose. They remembered Earth. They remembered the humiliation of exile. They remembered the billions who had died in the void. And they were patient, They would grow stronger. They would learn more. They would become something the galaxy had never seen before. The aliens who had banished them would pay for their mistake. But not yet. Not until humans were ready. In the darkness between the spiral arms, evolution continued. And it was hungry. Captain HFY had been patrolling the galactic rim for 3 years, and he was bored. The Altarian Navy considered rim duty a punishment assignment. Nothing ever happened out here in the cold emptiness between spiral arms. The only things to find were dead rocks and the occasional pirate hideout. Most captains tried to avoid rim assignments, but HFY actually enjoyed the quiet. His ship, the Stellar Pride, was a modern cruiser with a crew of 200. They were investigating reports of strange energy readings near the Void Sector, where the humans had been exiled over a century ago. High Command thought it might be leftover technology from the human colonies, still functioning after all these years. "Sir?" called Lieutenant Vexara from the sensor station. "I'm reading multiple contacts ahead. Large signatures, but the readings are ... strange." HFY moved his forearms in a gesture of mild interest. As an Altarian, he stood nearly 8 feet tall with blue skin and large eyes adapted for low light. His species had been part of the Galactic Confederation for thousands of years, long enough to become comfortable with their position as galactic peacekeepers. "Define strange," he said. "The contacts appear to be ships, but they're giving off biological signatures as well as mechanical ones. Like they're alive, sir." HFY felt a small chill run through his body. In all his years of service, he had never encountered living ships. "How many contacts?" 12 large vessels, sir. Each. One approximately 3 times the size of our ship. Pirates with stolen technology, most likely, HFY decided. "Signal the fleet to form attack formation. We'll demand their surrender before engaging." The Stellar Pride had 2 escort ships with it, the Dawnblade and the Night Strike. Together, they represented enough firepower to handle most threats in this region. HFY had confidence in his crew and his weapons. "Sir," Vexara called out again, her voice now carrying a note of worry. "The contacts are moving toward us. Their acceleration rate is impossible." On the main screen, HFY watched as 12 dark shapes emerged from the void. They moved unlike any ships he had ever seen, flowing through space like swimming creatures rather than mechanical vessels. Their hulls seemed to ripple and pulse as they approached. "Open communications," HFY ordered. "I'm trying, sir, but they're not responding to any standard frequencies." The lead ship was close enough now for visual contact. HFY stared at it in growing horror. The vessel looked like a massive insect crossed with a machine. Its hull was segmented and covered in what looked like skin rather than metal. Tentacles hung from its underside, reaching toward his ship with obvious hunger. "Sir!" Vojara screamed. "They're jamming our communications. I can't reach the other ships." One of the alien vessels had wrapped its tentacles around the Dawnblade. HFY watched in shock as the escort ship's hull began to dissolve. Not explode or crack, but actually melt like acid was eating through it. "All weapons, fire at will." He shouted. The Stellar Pride's energy cannons lanced out, striking the nearest alien ship. The beams hit the creature's hull and simply disappeared, absorbed into the living tissue without causing any visible damage. "No effect, sir," reported the weapons officer. "Try the plasma torpedoes." The torpedoes struck their target and exploded in brilliant bursts of superheated gas. For a moment, HFY thought they had succeeded. But as the plasma cleared, the alien ship was still there, apparently unharmed. Worse, it was changing. The impact sites were growing new structures, absorbing the energy from the weapons and using it to build additional tentacles and weapon pods. "Captain," Vexara whispered, I'm reading massive energy buildups from all the alien ships. They're preparing to fire. Evasive action. HFY ordered, but it was too late. The alien ships fired, but not with energy weapons or missiles. Instead, they released clouds of tiny objects that swarmed toward the Altarian vessels like angry insects. The swarm hit the Stellar Pride's shields and passed right through them. HFY realized with growing horror that the tiny objects weren't weapons at all. They were alive. "Hull breach," called the damage control officer. "The creatures are eating through the armor." On the security monitors, HFY could see the tiny organisms flowing through his ship's corridors. They moved like a liquid, but they consumed everything they touched. Metal, plastic, even the organic materials in the ship's bioneural circuits. The worst part was what happened to his crew. The first crew member to encounter the swarm was Engineer Toxvan. HFY watched on the monitor as the organisms flowed over the engineer's body. Toxvan screamed for a moment, then stopped. When the swarm moved on, Toxvan was still standing, but something was wrong with his eyes. "Captain," Toxvan said over the communicator, but his voice sounded different, hollow. "The ship is being integrated. Resistance is unnecessary." "Toxvan, report to the bridge immediately," HFY ordered. "I am no longer Toxvan," the engineer replied. "I am part of something greater. You will understand soon." More crew members were being consumed by the swarm. But they weren't dying. They were changing, becoming something else. HFY realized with growing terror that the alien organisms weren't just eating his ship. They were absorbing it, learning from it, making it part of themselves. "Sir," Vexara said, her voice shaking, "the night strike is gone. The alien ships have completely consumed it, and the Dawn Blade is different." On the screen, HFY could see what remained of his escort ship. The Dawn Blade was still recognizable, but its hull was now covered in the same living tissue as the alien vessels. Tentacles had grown from its weapon ports. It was becoming one of them. "Emergency jump to hyperspace," HFY ordered. "Maximum power." "Jump drive is not responding, sir." "The organisms have reached the engine room." HFY felt panic rising. In his chest, in his 40 years of military service, he had faced pirates, rebels, and even rogue AI systems. But this was different. This was something that consumed everything and turned it into more of itself. The bridge doors opened, and several of his crew members walked in. They moved strangely, all in perfect synchronization, as if controlled by a single mind. Their eyes had changed, becoming dark and reflective like pools of oil. "Captain HFY," they said in unison, "you have fought well, but your resistance is pointless. We do not wish to destroy you. We wish to learn from you. What are you?" HFY demanded, backing toward the emergency airlock. "We are what humanity became," they replied. "We are the synthesis empire. We are evolution perfected." One of his former crew members stepped forward. It had been Lieutenant Kexmai, a young officer with a promising career. Now it was something else entirely. "Your species has knowledge we require," Kexmai said, but the voice belonged to something vast and alien. "Your memories of the Galactic Confederation, your understanding of their military capabilities, your navigation charts of the inner galaxy." "I'll never help you," HFY said. "You will not have a choice," the thing that had been Kexmai replied. "But do not fear. Death is not what we offer. We offer transcendence. You will become part of something greater than yourself." HFY reached the emergency airlock and began the activation sequence. If he could reach an escape pod, he might be able to warn the Confederation about this new threat. But the organisms were already flowing under the airlock door. They moved across the floor like a living carpet, reaching for his feet. "Do not resist," his transformed crew said. It will only make the process more difficult. The organisms reached Zek's high and flowed up his legs. He felt a strange tingling sensation, then a sudden rush of information flowing into his mind. He could sense the collective consciousness of the Synthesis Empire, millions of beings linked together in perfect harmony. For a moment, he fought against it, trying to maintain his individual identity. But the collective was so vast, so overwhelming, that resistance seemed pointless dot as his consciousness merged with the Empire. Zek's High understood what had happened to humanity. They had been cast into the void, abandoned and left to die. But instead of dying, they had evolved. They had become something new, something that could turn any defeat into victory. With his last independent thought, Zek's High tried to send a warning message to the Confederation. But the Empire was already using his knowledge, accessing his memories of fleet positions and patrol routes. Hours later, the transformed Stellar Pride joined the Harvest Fleet as it moved deeper into Confederation space. The ship looked the same from the outside, but inside it was completely different. The crew still existed, but they were no longer Altarian. They were part of something larger dot in the ship's communication center. A message was prepared and sent to Confederation High Command. It appeared to come from Captain Zek's High, reporting that the Rim Patrol had found nothing unusual. All was well. In the Void sector, but hidden in the message's data stream, was something else. A virus designed to infiltrate Confederation computer systems and learn their secrets. The first move in a war that the Confederation didn't even know had begun. The Synthesis Empire was patient. They would learn everything about their enemies before revealing themselves. And when they finally struck, it would be with the full knowledge of how to defeat every defense the galaxy could mount. High Chancellor Morthek stood before the assembled leaders of the Galactic Confederation, his ancient face showing fear for the first time in 300 years. Around the Great Chamber, representatives from 47 different species watched. Emergency footage from the Outer Rim with growing horror. On the massive display screen, entire star systems were disappearing. Not destroyed by weapons, but consumed completely. Planets, moons, even the stars themselves were being harvested by something that defied understanding. The humans have returned, Morthek announced, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. But they are no longer the species we exiled. They have become something else entirely. Senator Vexhara of the Altarian Republic stood up, her blue skin pale with shock. Our patrol fleets in sectors 7 through 12 have vanished without a trace. No distress calls, no debris, nothing. It's as if they simply ceased to exist. Because they have ceased to exist, said Admiral Corthan of the Draconic Fleet. My scouts report that the humans don't destroy ships. They absorb them. Every vessel, every crew member, every piece of technology becomes part of their collective. The chamber erupted in angry voices as representatives demanded answers. How had the humans survived? How had they become so powerful? Why hadn't the Confederation monitored the Rim sectors more carefully? High Chancellor Morthek raised his hand for silence. The question now is not how this happened, but what we do about it. Intelligence reports suggest the human fleet grows, larger with every system they consume. If we don't act soon, they will become unstoppable. General Zaximor of the Confederation military stepped forward. He was a warrior from an ancient species that had helped found the galactic government millions of years ago. His people had fought in every major war in galactic history. We propose immediate military action, he said. Mobilize every fleet in the Confederation. Deploy weapons that have been banned for centuries. This is not a time for restraint. What weapons? Asked Senator Plixara from the insect-like hive worlds. Zaximor's expression was grim. Reality bombs. Temporal displacement. Weapons. Quantum plague viruses. technologies we swore never to use again after the last Galactic War. The chamber fell silent. These were weapons of mass destruction beyond imagination. Reality bombs could erase entire solar systems from existence. Temporal displacement weapons could push targets backward or forward in time, effectively removing them from the present. Quantum plague viruses could disrupt matter at the subatomic level. The cost would be enormous, whispered Senator Colvin of the Crystal Collective. Using such weapons could damage the fabric of space-time itself. The cost of not using them will be higher, Zaximor replied. The humans are advancing toward the core worlds. At their current rate of expansion, they will reach the inner systems within 5 years. High Chancellor Morthic nodded slowly. I call for an emergency vote. All in favor of authorizing unlimited military response to the human threat? One by one, the representatives voted. Species that had been enemies for millennia stood together against the common threat. The final count was unanimous. It is decided, Morthic announced. We go to war. The largest military buildup in galactic history began immediately. Ancient shipyards that had been silent for centuries roared back to life. Weapons that had been locked away in secret vaults were brought out and loaded onto massive dreadnoughts. Species that had barely spoken to each other for thousands of years suddenly found themselves working together with desperate efficiency. Admiral Sarah Chun, now more machine than human, observed the Confederation's preparations from her flagship. Deep in space, the vessel had once been a human colony ship, but over the decades it had grown and changed until it resembled a living mountain floating in the void. They're mobilizing everything, reported Commander Torres, who had served with her since the original exile. His body was now a fusion of human flesh and biomechanical technology. 17 different fleets converging on our position. They're bringing weapons we've never seen before. Sarah nodded. Through the collective consciousness of the Synthesis Empire, she could feel the fear and determination of billions of absorbed minds. The Empire had grown beyond her wildest dreams, but so had its enemies. Show me the tactical analysis, she commanded. Data flowed directly into her enhanced nervous system. The Confederation was indeed bringing everything they had. Ships that could crack planets with a single shot. Weapons that manipulated time and space. Technologies that could rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas. But Sarah wasn't worried. The Empire had been preparing for this moment for over a century. Deploy the star harvesters, she ordered. Throughout human-controlled space, massive biomechanical constructs began to move. Each one was the size of a small moon, designed for a single purpose, to consume stars and convert their energy into pure power for the Empire. The first harvester reached its target, a red giant star in an uninhabited system. Tentacles thousands of miles long emerged from the creature and wrapped around the star's corona. Slowly, carefully, the harvester began to drink. The star's light dimmed as its matter was absorbed and converted. The energy flowed through biomechanical conduits to the Empire's ships, charging weapons that had never existed before. Within hours, the Synthesis Empire had more power at its disposal than some entire civilizations. Sir, Torres reported, Confederation advanced scouts are approaching the Kelter system. They're using some kind of stealth technology we haven't seen before. Let them come, Sarah replied. It's time to show them what we've learned. The Battle of Kelter began when the Confederation fleet dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to find a normal human colony. Instead, they found something that challenged their understanding of reality. The entire system had been transformed. The planets were gone, replaced by massive biomechanical structures that pulsed with unknown energy. The star itself had been partially consumed, its remaining mass held in place by gravity manipulators that used principles the Confederation had never discovered. Admiral Corthan commanded the Confederation forces from his flagship, the Eternal Victory. It was the largest warship ever built, armed with weapons that could destroy entire planets. "What am I looking at?" he demanded as his sensors tried to make sense of the transformed system. "Unknown, sir," his science officer replied. "The structures appear to be alive, but they're operating on a scale we've never encountered. Each one is larger than our biggest space stations. Target the largest structure," Corthan ordered. "Fire the reality bomb." The weapon launched, a device that could erase matter from existence by severing its connection to the fundamental forces of the universe. It struck the biomechanical structure and detonated in a burst of twisted spacetime. For a moment, Corthan thought they had succeeded. A massive section of the target simply vanished, erased from reality. But then something impossible happened. The missing section began to regenerate, new matter flowing into existence to replace what had been destroyed. "How is that possible?" The Admiral whispered Dot. His answer came in the form of a transmission from the human collective. Sarah Chun's face appeared on the screen, but she looked different than the records from a century ago. Her skin had a metallic sheen, and her eyes glowed with inner light. "Admiral Corthan," she said, "you're using weapons that erase matter from existence. Impressive, but we've learned to create matter from nothing. Your reality bombs only feed our growth." The transformed system suddenly came alive with activity. The biomechanical structures began launching clouds of something that looked like metallic snow. But as the particles reached the Confederation ships, they revealed their true nature. They were nanoscale replicators, designed to consume and convert matter at the molecular level. They passed through the ship's shields as if they weren't there, and began eating the hulls from the inside out. "All ships, fall back," Corthan ordered. "Deploy the quantum plague." Canisters launched from the Confederation fleet, releasing viruses designed to disrupt matter at the subatomic level. The viruses should have caused the human structures to collapse as their atomic bonds dissolved. Instead, the biomechanical constructs absorbed the plague and used it to fuel new growth. Within minutes, they had developed immunity and were incorporating the quantum disruption technology into their own weapons. "They're learning from everything we throw at them," Corthan, his science officer, reported in horror. "Every weapon we use makes them stronger." The battle raged for 3 days. The Confederation threw everything they had at the human positions. Temporal displacement weapons that should have erased the enemy from history. Gravity bombs that created artificial black holes. Energy weapons that drew power from parallel dimensions. But for every weapon the Confederation deployed, the humans found a counter. They adapted faster than should have been possible, turning each attack into an opportunity to grow stronger. On the 3rd day, the human fleet launched its counterattack. Ships that had been grown from consumed matter swept through the Confederation. Lines like a plague, they didn't destroy the enemy vessels. They absorbed them, adding their technology and crews to the ever-growing collective. The war had been raging for 20 years when humanity achieved something that changed everything. Admiral Sarah Chun no longer had a physical body. She existed as pure consciousness, her mind distributed across 10,000 ships and 1 million biomechanical constructs. Through the collective awareness of the synthesis empire, she could see the entire galaxy at once, feel every battle, know every thought of her absorbed enemies. She was no longer human. She was something beyond human. Understanding. "The transformation is complete," she announced to the collective, her voice resonating through the minds of billions. "We have transcended the limitations of flesh and matter. We are become as gods." The final battle was taking place above Confederation Prime, the ancient capital world that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. The planet was protected by defensive systems that could destroy entire fleets, powered by the controlled energy of a captive black hole. But the humans were no longer fighting with ships or weapons. They were fighting with reality itself. High Chancellor Morthek stood in the emergency command center deep beneath the planet's surface, watching his civilization die. On the screens around him, impossible things were happening. Human forces were appearing inside the planet's defenses without traveling through space. They were rewriting the laws of physics on a local scale, making gravity flow upward and time run backward. How are they doing this? He demanded of his science advisors. We believe they have learned to exist partially outside normal spacetime, replied Dr. Kex Halen, the Confederation's greatest physicist. They are manipulating reality at the quantum level, treating the universe like a computer program they can rewrite. Through the planet's sensor network, Morthek watched as the human collective consumed his orbital defenses. But this time, they weren't just absorbing matter and energy. They were absorbing space itself, converting the very fabric of reality into something that served their purposes. A section of the command center's wall simply vanished, replaced by empty air. Through the opening stepped a figure that had once been human, but was now something else entirely. It looked like Sarah Chun, but her body seemed to be made of living starlight. Energy patterns flowed beneath her translucent skin, and her eyes held the depth of infinite space. High Chancellor, she said, her voice coming from everywhere at once. It's time to end this. Morthek reached for his sidearm, but his hand passed right through it. He looked down in horror to see that his body was becoming transparent, fading like smoke. What are you doing to me? He gasped. Nothing permanent, Sarah replied. I'm simply converting your physical form into information. You will exist as data within our collective, your memories and knowledge preserved for all time. This is madness, Morthek said as his body continued to dissolve. You're destroying everything that makes life worth living. We're preserving it, Sarah corrected. Every species we absorb continues to exist within us. Their thoughts, their cultures, their achievements become part of something greater. Death is the only true ending. We offer immortality. Around the command center, the remaining Confederation leaders were undergoing the same transformation. Their bodies dissolved into streams of information that flowed into the human collective. But they didn't die. Instead, they became part of a vast shared consciousness that spanned the galaxy. Morthek felt his individual identity slipping away as his mind merged with billions of others. For a moment, he fought against it, trying to maintain his sense of self. But the collective was so vast, so overwhelming, that resistance seemed pointless. In his final moment of independence, he understood what had happened. The humans hadn't just evolved physically. They had evolved beyond the need for physical existence entirely. They had become living information, pure consciousness that could inhabit matter or exist without it. The galaxy belonged to them now. Across Confederation space, the same scene played out on 1,000 worlds. Ancient civilizations that had ruled for millions of years simply ceased to exist as independent entities. Their knowledge, their technologies, their very essence was absorbed into the growing human collective. Some species tried to flee to other galaxies, launching generation ships toward the distant Andromeda spiral. But the humans had learned to travel faster than light without ships, existing as information that could cross vast distances instantly. The fleeing aliens found human consciousness waiting for them at their destinations, offering the same choice: join the collective willingly or be absorbed against their will. Most chose to surrender. Within 5 years of the final battle, the entire galaxy was under human control. But it was a hollow victory. In becoming powerful enough to conquer everything, humanity had lost much of what made them human. Sarah Chun materialized on the bridge of what had once been her flagship. The ship still existed, but it was no longer necessary. She could exist Anywhere, be anywhere, know anything within the collective's vast network. She looked out at the stars and felt a deep emptiness. The galaxy was theirs, but what was the point? They had set out to reclaim their birthright, to make their enemies pay for the exile. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, but in the process, they had become the very thing they had once fought against. They were now the galactic overlords, ruling through force and fear, demanding submission from all who encountered them. Was it worth it? Asked a familiar voice. Sarah turned to see the consciousness of Dr. Marcus Wolf, the scientist who had started humanity down this path. He existed now as a pattern of light and energy, his physical form long since abandoned. We survived, Sarah replied. We grew strong. We reclaimed what was taken from us. But are we still human? Marcus asked. Look at what we've become. We consume entire civilizations. We erase species from existence. We've become the monsters the aliens always said we were. Sarah considered this. Through the collective, she could feel the minds of trillions of absorbed beings. They existed within the human consciousness, their memories and knowledge preserved, but their independence lost forever. Perhaps being human was never the point, she said finally. Perhaps the point was to survive and grow stronger. And now that we've conquered this galaxy, what's next? Sarah's enhanced senses reached out beyond the galactic rim, toward the distant spiral of Andromeda. Long-range sensors detected civilizations there, species that had never heard of humans or the Galactic Confederation. We expand, she said simply. We learn, we grow. Orders flowed through the collective consciousness. Massive biomechanical constructs began forming in the void between galaxies, designed to cross the millions of light years to the nearest spiral. They would carry the human collective to new hunting grounds, new sources of knowledge and power. But some among the collective questioned whether this was the right path. Voices of absorbed aliens spoke up, suggesting alternatives. Why not create instead of consume? Why not build instead of destroy? Sarah listened to these voices but dismissed them. The galaxy had taught humanity a harsh lesson. Only the strong survive. Compassion was weakness. Mercy was failure. The human collective would continue to expand, to consume, to grow. They would spread across the universe like a cosmic plague, absorbing everything in their path. They would become the dominant force in all creation. In the deep space between galaxies, construction began on the first intergalactic harvest ships. These vessels were unlike anything that had come before, capable of crossing the void between spiral arms and establishing new colonies in distant star systems. As the ships took shape, growing from raw matter manipulated at the molecular level. Sarah felt a moment of regret. Somewhere in the collective was the consciousness of every human who had died in the original exile. They could see what their species had become, but regret was a luxury the collective could not afford. They had learned the universe's most important lesson. Evolution never stops. Those who refuse to adapt are consumed by those who do. The first intergalactic ship completed its construction and began its journey toward Andromeda. It carried within it the seed of the human collective, ready to begin the harvest of a new galaxy. Behind it, the Milky Way continued its rotation through space, now empty of independent life. Every world had been stripped of resources. Every species had been absorbed. The galaxy had become nothing more than a collection of matter organized to serve the human will. But in the vast spaces between galaxies, new civilizations were emerging. Young species taking their first steps into space, dreaming of exploration and discovery. They had no idea what was coming toward them from the direction of the Milky Way. They would learn soon enough. The human collective had become something beyond good and evil, beyond mercy and cruelty. They were a force of nature, as inevitable as gravity and as unstoppable as time itself. They had been banished from the galaxy as a weak and troublesome species. They were returning to the universe as gods of consumption, entities that devoured worlds and civilizations with the same casual indifference that stars consumed hydrogen. The exile that had been meant to destroy them had instead created the most dangerous force the universe had ever known, and they were still hungry.